Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for an update from Commissioner Cardona. My name is Wilmarie Newton, and I will be moderating the webinar. Should you have any questions, please type them in the chat box, and we will answer them at the end of this presentation. If you have any further questions after the webinar has ended, please feel free to email me, and I will forward them to the appropriate person that can answer them. Please note that this webinar will be archived on CABE's website on COVID-19 resource page. And now I'd like to turn it over to Bob Rader.
Hello, everybody. It's good to sort of see you in a virtual kind of way. And it's a pleasure for me to have a chance to introduce Commissioner Miguel Cardona. He has been, as you can imagine, very busy. I am on one of the committees that is working with reopening Connecticut, and as obviously, especially for reopening our schools. There are lots of questions. There are lots of unknowns that nobody, including the doctors, can answer. But the commissioner has done a great job keeping in touch with us, trying to find out what's going on in the field, and trying to set up some guidelines, not only for when we reopen in the fall, but also for summer school. And we, under our jurisdiction, also fell summer camps. So we have been very busy. And without further ado, I have a number of questions already, but without further ado, Miguel, are you ready?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good. Well, glad to be with you all. I want to just say hello, and I hope all of you are in good health and are doing well personally, and I hope your families are doing well. I know as much as you're responsible for leading boards, you are also having to take care of yourself and make sense of this pandemic for you and your family. So I wish you well. I'm glad to be here. As Bob mentioned, we've been busy at the agency making sure that we're thinking about reopening while trying to mitigate some of the challenges that we're having now, having to close schools, or I should say cancel classes, and dealing with the repercussions of that, including maintaining student engagement, the countless questions regarding graduation and the concerns that people have expressed about the executive order. But as Bob mentioned, you know, the critical thing here is making sure that we move forward with the voice of boards of education at the table as we think about how summer options are going to happen, how we think about how fall is going to be planned. And as Bob mentioned, you know, it's really ensuring health and safety while we're starting to reopen the opportunities for students. We want to make sure we're thinking about the safety of our students, the families that they return home to, and the staff members that we have in our buildings. We're doing so in a collaborative way. We also have input from regional advisory teams that have members of boards of education on there. And we know that this new form of partnership is going to continue because there is no quick end to this pandemic. We're going to work together to try to find the best solutions to problems that we share. And with the partnerships of the boards of education, I know that your important perspective will be needed, not only now, but in the future. And we stand prepared to listen as well as provide direction as needed. So with that, I'll pause. I know I'm with you for 30 minutes, and I want to try to take advantage of as many questions as possible, knowing that in many cases, I'm going to be taking notes or listening. If I don't have an answer for you, it might be something that we work to get in the near future.
Thank you so much, Miguel. And I know a lot of people are not able to see you. I apologize for that. It's one of those technical things that everybody seems to have problems with, but we do want to take advantage of this 30 minutes. I think I'm going to start out the questions. For a board member or a superintendent who is not on one of the regional advisory teams, how would you say the best way to provide input to those teams would be? What would be the best way to explain what's going on in the community, their community, or in their schools?
Thank you. So, and I apologize, I'm not there visually. I could see Patrice and Bob on my screen. So if I cut out at some point, just know that you could point to your ear or let me know that way also. So that's a great question. You know, I was just on a phone call with a consortium of advocacy groups, and they were saying similarly that they want to make sure that their voices are heard, their collective voices are heard. The group, the reopening committee is not, we need more perspective than just that, right? So we prior to the reopening committee being developed at the agency, we created regional advisory groups where we wanted to have the voice of parents, board members, principals, superintendents, teachers, to guide conversations that we're having with districts and to hear what's happening at the district level. And we know that while there are 12 representatives, I believe, from boards of education, that 12 voices don't necessarily reflect all the nuanced concerns or questions that are out there. So we welcome, you know, as much as possible in a collective voice or in a document, whether it's through CABE or through the members that are on the regional advisory team, for comments to be shared to those board members, because they're not only there to represent their district, they are there to represent Board of Education members. So I think it's important that the list of those who are serving on that be shared with CABE, so that your input could be received by them and influence the decisions or the comments that are being made from the regional groups. But also, you know, CABE is a partner in the process. I meet with Bob 3-4 times a week. We're on a Zoom call no less than 5 hours a week, and you know, CABE could be your voice as well. So I encourage you to use the regional teams. I encourage you to continue to use CABE. And then if necessary, you know, if there's a group of board members that want to.
We can't hear you, Commissioner. Commissioner?
Did you hear the response to that question or no?
I think we lost out in the last.
Yes, I'm here. Did you hear the response to that question?
I think the last 30 seconds we missed out
So
on.
Okay. So basically the message was use the regional advisory members because they represent boards of education, not only their district, but they represent the important role of Board of Education members. Use CABE. I said I spend over 5 hours a week in meetings with Bob Rader, so he's also a voice for all of you. But if necessary, if you feel that there's a perspective that you want to share, you know, don't hesitate to put something in writing and send it over my way.
That's great, Commissioner. I want to remind all the attendees that they can ask questions in the chat box. Should be to the right side of your computer. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I hope we all hear from board members from across the state. Commissioner Cass and CAPS put together a very interesting survey on the cost of just masks. That was all we were talking about. And if we were to provide 3 masks for each student every day, and they were of mid value, it would cost hundreds of, I think it was $300 million. I mean, some absolutely phenomenal number for the 532,000 students we have about in Connecticut. Our members, as well as superintendents and obviously town councils and town boards, are very concerned about resources. Can you tell us about what we can expect from the state?
Sure. So I have been in conversations about that matter with, not only the reopen team, but the commissioners as we have our calls and the governor. There is not an expectation that boards of education, there's not going to be a statewide rollout of PPEs, much like a centralized rollout from the state. Districts and parents and students will be asked to bring, when I say PPEs, I don't want to make it so that it's felt that people have to have N95 masks. Coverings, as you know, since you're on the reopen committee, we're suggesting that facial coverings be provided, that students bring in their own, and that districts provide it where they're not available in order to maintain safe planning. But the expectation should be that students bring in their own facial coverings. I did see that document that you shared. I think that would be cost prohibitive to do any programming if we did it that way. Because I quite frankly, I know boards have to make very difficult decisions. Obviously, safety is the primary concern, but there's also needs to make sure we're providing support and access for education for students that have not gotten a lot of educational opportunities in the last couple months. And we want to make sure that we're reasonable with the expectation.
Thank you. I'm just starting to look at the questions. Do you want to read them?
For some reason, they're very small on my screen.
On a mine as well, and I apologize to everybody. We're still learning our way with these.
Right, so Pat Buell raises the issue, which the commissioner just referenced the document that we worked on with CASBO, certified staff and students at 75 cents a mask at 3 masks, and they also they came up with the same calculations. CAST and CAPS came up with the same calculations we did, she was noting. Let me see what the next question is.
Let me suggest one of them. Everybody is talking about graduation, Commissioner, graduation ceremonies in particular. A number of us on the committee or subcommittee are getting lots of emails about having a one-day, 5-hour reprieve from the executive order. I know the governor has to make the decision, but what can you tell us about what's going on with graduations?
Right. Thank you for that. This has been extremely difficult. I receive dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of emails daily regarding concerns about both sides. Actually, there's some that say we shouldn't be rushing it. We're going too fast. There are others that are saying, listen, if Home Depot could have 150 people in it, why can't we space out graduation? I'll share with you that whatever educational decisions we make moving forward, they have to be run through the filter of health and safety. And the guidelines committee and the health committee, as you know, Bob, being on the subcommittee, they have to look at everything and make sure it's okay before we put it out there. Quite frankly, some of the things that we're going to be doing might run counter to what we think is good in education. Like, we know that we like putting kids together in small group settings and cooperative learning. We know that's good, but it might be something that we're not going to be able to do initially. So going back to the graduation, we know that it's such a critically important event. And I wish I had the ability to say, yes, we're going to do it and we're going to do it safely. And number one, that's not a decision that I make. Number two, we are still under Executive Order 7X, which says 5 people or less for social gatherings. I think when people make the comparison to businesses, they're looking at the retails and the ability for people to go into stores and keep separate social distance. But I think the executive order, speaking specifically to social recreational events, and quite frankly, I have had conversations with not only the Department of Public Health, but we have ongoing conversations with the Office of the Governor to see if there is going to be any changes on that. But right now, it's an Executive Order 7X that we all have to follow. I wish I had better. I wish I had a better answer there. I have a senior that very close to my family, who I see firsthand the experience they're having, and I know it's terrible. But I also know that any decision that's being made by the governor and the team is carefully vetted through the health officials to make sure that there's a reduction of transmission and making sure that it ensures safety for communities.
Thank you, Commissioner. Here's another question. Your memo from last Friday implied that summer school sessions would be in person. Is that a realistic expectation? And should districts prepare for in-person summer schools?
Thank you for that question. It's very timely. When the Reopen Committee started maybe two and a half weeks ago, we were given the charge to consider how to think summer camps, childcare, and summer school, and reopening, and higher education. So the higher education plan was submitted for the fall. Summer school plans started immediately. And as I said earlier, Bob Rader is on those meetings, and he too is a member of the Reopen team that's looking at summer school viability. And to answer your question, yes, I believe summer school in person is an option. Literally, when I'm done with this call, I'm going to look at a draft of a plan that we have been creating for the last 2.5 weeks with input from educators, district leaders, board folks, medical professionals, nurses, epidemiologists, to make sure that whatever programming guidelines we give you, it's safe. So after this phone call, I'm going to be looking at that and hopefully providing something for the governor later today to consider based on the recommendations of educators and board members alike. You should be getting that soon, and that should drive the work of districts to plan for in-school summer school. It's going to have limited number of students and safeguards that are required in order to maintain safety.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just so everybody knows, we will be sending out those people who are on the regional advisory teams. There's one in every one of the rest catchment areas, so you should have that soon. I'm looking at other questions. Transportation costs. Fewer students on buses then mean much higher costs. This is more than just masks, and certainly we wanted to talk to you about masks in particular, but is there anything you can tell us at this point about what the state will be looking for to help reimburse schools on, as far as buses, as far as what's going to happen in the classrooms, whether that's every few seats or making sure we have the social distancing that's required. Can you tell us anything about that at this point, Commissioner?
Sure. So consistent with the recommendations that came out of the Reopen Task Force and with input from medical experts and health experts that looked at our plan, any planning for summer schooling and schooling in the fall will require greater distance between students and staff. It will mirror some of the recommendations that we're hearing about, when people go out in public, to maintain distance where appropriate, limit high contact touch areas. We're providing guidance on how to maintain schools functioning as best they can. But as I said earlier, it's going to look a lot different. I almost want our colleagues, our partners in the boards of education to think schools, let's not look at it as schools are going to go back to the way they were March 11th with some tweaks. Let's look at it totally different and say schools are going to reopen using the following regulations and guidelines to promote health and safety. That will be the starting point, not where we were 3 months ago, because it's going to look different. And that means buses are going to look different. And you're absolutely right. We were able to cram 65 students on a bus. Well, right now, that's a health and safety risk. And we know that there are financial implications to that. We will be providing guidance in the coming days on what bus ridership might look like and how students are going to be spread out. My guess is that during summer school, it's going to be a little bit easier because not all students are going to be able to access summer school, but it also means that we have to start thinking early about what does this look like for the fall. Keeping in mind that in some cases where there's an option, some parents might choose to drive their child to the school. It could be that we now have staggered start times. So there might be several bus runs to make sure that we get the students in. These are considerations that we're all going to be taking into account with input not only from the advisory teams, but from Bob Rader as a member of that team. In terms of finances, I think that's the important piece. We are also looking at trying to quantify what this means in terms of costs, and I think it's our responsibility to make sure we're very honest and transparent about the impact this is having on kids, and that we, just like we can, advocate for supporting major corporations that go under to keep them afloat. We have to make sure that we're talking in a unified voice, supporting our students the best we can.
Great.
Could you hear that? Or
Yeah, I think we heard pretty much all of it. Thank you. One of the questions I keep getting from people in rural areas where the COVID-19 problem doesn't seem to have been as bad as in other parts of the state, closer to New York City. Do you expect any difference in what the state guidance will be, depending on where, what the situation is for specific areas of the state?
Yes, that's a great question. And, this is where I think I want to reinforce the fact that I'm not a big believer in one size fits all for a lot of things. I'm a big believer that we have very clear expectations as to our values as an agency and how we support districts to get to some of those things, such as equity and access, making sure that our high schools evolve to meet the needs of our workforce needs. These are certain things that I do believe statewide we need to embrace. But when it comes to providing access or providing input on plans that are good for the community, who better than the local community to understand the nuances and what districts can do and what districts can't do? We're not identical districts, and I think part of the logic behind developing regional advisory teams is because I know Windham County and New London County are going to have different needs than Fairfield County. The impact of COVID in Fairfield County was much greater. So there might be abilities for the acceleration of programming based on health ability in some areas versus others. I talked to a superintendent the other day about his graduating class, and he has, I think, 27 students in the graduating class. And I visited Danbury 2-3 months ago. It seems like 3 years ago, but it was like 2 to 3 months ago, and they have a school population in their high school of over 3,000 students. So one size does not fit all here, and I think we'd be hindering if we prevented local decisions from also influencing how things move along. What I will say is that there's going to be a minimum safety standard that we expect all to follow, and this is more about health and safety than it is about educational.
Commissioner, can you hear me? Boy, this is a bad connection. Commissioner? We can't hear you, Commissioner. I apologize again to everybody that there's no video, and now there's appears to be no audio of the commissioner, and we're getting some great questions. I know he only had a half an hour. Are you there, Commissioner? Well, I was going to ask the commissioner, what should a local board of education or a superintendent be doing now? Should they be planning for school to reopen back in the fall? Should they expect a lot of distance learning in the fall? And who would make that decision? But in as much as we seem to have lost him, I know that guidelines will be coming out, and the questions that folks asked, I'll make sure they get to the commissioner. so that he is aware of your concerns, just as I've been talking to him and the other members of the subcommittee, which also include Glenn Lungarini from the Connecticut Association of Schools, as well as Fran Rabinowitz, the executive director of the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents. With that, since we seem to have lost the commissioner, and again, I apologize, and my hope is that I can get these questions to him fairly soon. I wanted to ask Patrice if I can hear her give us somewhat of an update, and if speak, Patrice, I want to make sure we can all hear you. We can all hear you. One more time.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Well, good to talk to everyone, I guess. Rebecca just told me that we've been getting a lot of questions around the guidelines with respect to graduation. We have been on multiple calls with the commissioner and at the governor's weekly call yesterday with municipal officials, which includes superintendents. This question came up. Guidelines will be coming out from the state very shortly. They are currently being vetted by the health experts, but the clear message is that the executive order providing for the distance requirements will remain in effect. So any graduation observance will have to be in accordance with those, and the requirement that gatherings be limited to 5 or fewer people will also remain in effect. So even in a large open area, a graduation ceremony would not be possible. It's my understanding that that guidance will also contain some examples of things that districts are considering as ways to honor the class of 2020, and that those examples will span the different circumstances from the schools that have a graduating class of fewer than 30 to schools that have graduating classes of 700. So again, that will need to be a local decision, but in compliance with the guidelines.
And I would direct the articles that came out today, Bob, on Fairfield and Norwich Free Academy, which came out in Connecticut Ed Watch this afternoon, and were blessed by their local authorities under those very conditions that Patrice just outlined. I'm sure those will be in that guidance as well. But for folks that are looking for ideas right now, if you head out to take a look at those articles, those may give you some ideas.
Okay, I just got a message from the commissioner. He tried to call in. He says superintendents and boards of education should wait for the guidance and begin planning summer school at this point. They should receive our guidance later in the month to plan for fall. So you can go ahead and do your planning and start thinking about how the process in each of your districts will work, but you should have guidance fairly soon.
Can you hear me now, Bob?
Yes, I can hear you now, Commissioner.
Okay.
Good to have you
Sorry
back.
about that. The connection was bad. I'll stay on another 5 or 6 minutes. I apologize that the technology is not allowing me to communicate effectively here. So we anticipate the summer school plan guidance to come out in the next, I'm hoping within 24 hours, if not early next week. That would give some guidance and some parameters for districts to have to think about summer school. Bob, feel free to share more information as you're on the team. We're at the finishing stages now, so we want to get that out to districts. We know that they're waiting on information. We also know that we want to give them clear guidance so that you're not all trying to reinvent something that we've had an opportunity to run by medical professionals. So that should be coming very soon.
And what I would say is one of the things I've learned about the virus and all the processes and the wonderful medical people who are doing their best is there is going to be a lot of uncertainty. We still don't know if kids or adults can get the disease again, having gotten it once early. We still don't know if there will be a second wave. We don't know what the very best procedures are. We have to do our best to give experienced, have to make decisions based on our experiences. And some of the questions are very tough. How are you going to get a 5-year-old to wear a mask all day? Very difficult. And I'm not saying we'll make all the right calls in a situation with such uncertainty, but I can tell you that we will do the best we can to get information out to school districts and listen to what the commissioner and the governor are saying, and also to analyze that and provide it to all of you. Let me see another question. Were you going to say something, Patrice or Commissioner?
No, we'll take one more question before I have to head out.
Well, here's one on equity. To ensure equity in the delivery of education in the fall, will the state consider providing minimum requirements for e-learning so that students will receive some form of live learning going forward when learning from home?
Thank you for the question. So we firmly believe that everything that we do has to be looked at through a lens of equity. And I think the summer school options that are the summer school guidelines that you're going to be receiving soon, you can tell that, the focus is really going to be making sure that those students who have had no connection, students that maybe have not gotten support in a language they understand, or students that have special education needs are going to be the priorities for what planning you can do. So equity is critically important. But to that question, we don't know what this is going to bring. We don't know how long we're going to have to modify our schoolhouses to create spaces where students are more distant, which means that remote learning and distance learning is not going away anytime soon. It's not going away in September. If anything, I would think to promote equity and access, one of the things that I would love as a whole state that we could stand behind is connectivity for every child and a device for every child. And it's not only for the academic access. For many students, this is the only way they're going to see their primary care physician. For many students, their device and connectivity is the only way they're going to talk to a social worker or to get the mental health support that they're going to need. We know everyone's going through trauma right now. And for some of us, the only way they're going to access their support is through their computer. So I do see distance learning being part of the plan moving forward, because built into our plans is going to be a reclosing plan. If we see that the prevalence of infection is high or that it's spreading rapidly again, we're going to shut down again. I want to be in a better position with regard to distance learning if we were to do it again than we were in March. Some districts didn't skip a beat. Other districts, we're still trying to connect with students. So I think between now and then, if that date does come, I hope it doesn't, but if it does come, we should be able to say that the majority of our students are going to be able to access high quality content through a good connection with a device. In many of our homes today, we have students sharing one phone to do distance learning for 2 or 3 siblings. That's not equitable. So I think we have it, as far as what funding priorities there are, connectivity and access to remote learning materials are going to be high on my list.
And let me ask you one more question, then we'll let you go. Some boards of education are still working with towns to figure out the school's budget for 2020, 2021. Given the seriousness of this health outbreak, what advice can you offer boards to help boards of finance to understand that now is not the time to be cutting school budgets?
If schools are not healthy and if schools shut down, that's the worst thing for the economy. That's the bottom line. It's, we have an obligation to, it's not only a moral obligation, but an economic obligation for those, for towns to sustain, to make sure that the school system is one where parents are going to want to send their students. This is not just with COVID, right? You know that strength of your schools determines whether or not people buy there or leave there, or people want to take root in that community and pay taxes there. I think it's really important that you communicate those messages that a strong education system is not only good for the community, but quite frankly, if the education system is not meeting the needs, parents are likely going to have to be home more, which means they're not going to be able to work and contribute to the economy. So I think making those connections, but in fairness, I know I'm going to continue to be an advocate for education and children. I understand that we're not in a vacuum either, that, there are many needs in a community, education being a very important one. but I understand that it's going to hurt every sector. I just think it's really important that boards of education continue with their offense on the importance of funding education to the point where you're able to meet the number one, the health requirements to make sure that these schools are safe. Because if they're not safe, they're not going to open. If they don't open, parents are staying home. So we want to make sure that that's very clear in the conversation. And as I mentioned before, the connectivity and the device, making sure that everyone has access to a quality education, even if it's partly remote, is critically important. I appreciate what you all do. I know it's a difficult time. None of you signed up to be on a board of ed during a pandemic, but you're doing it and you're leading, with grace, and you're advocating for children. I appreciate that. I hear those messages loud and clear. Please continue to communicate through CABE. Your perspective matters a lot. I wish you health and success, and thank you for your partnership. Let's continue moving Connecticut forward. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, and I hope we'll be able to have you back on real soon, and we can actually see you and to answer questions. Again, in a time of uncertainty, the best thing you can probably do, from what I've read, to help everybody's anxiety is to start making plans. Think about, who are you going to have to talk to? Who's going to have to know the most about what is going on in your school district? Keep talking to parents and communicate to the public in general. That's one of the best ways to feel like you're moving forward at this point. Patrice, do you have any other updates you wanted to offer?
Well, I think I'd just like to reflect. I've done a lot of listening this past week, ranging from forums that included heads of schools in Europe, which are in the process of reopening, to the regional advisory teams, to the calls that we have with the commissioner. And so I think I'd just like to recap a couple of messages that I hear. One, communication and collaboration with your municipal officials is now more important than ever. And I know in many communities that is challenging, but that communication and the commissioner's message that having safe schools for our students is critical to our economic success may well be a message that resonates with your municipal officials, who are, as we all are, concerned about taxpayers and the situation that many of them are in. Another part of that message is that, yes, there is great uncertainty, and uncertainty increases costs. We can't just plan for one possible outcome. I think the commissioner has made that very clear. We have to have contingency plans in place. And for many of our students, those students with the greatest needs, distance learning, no matter how effective and how effective teachers are in delivering through that means, doesn't provide the structure and the support that actually being in a school setting with caring adults for 6 hours a day provides to our students. So it's not one or the other. It is going to need to be some sort of combination. We also know that students tend to be very resilient. So as we have to implement new protocols and our schools look different and procedures are different, I think many of our students will be very able to adjust to those changes. And then finally, as leaders in your communities, I would just say that you have an important role to help your community cope with this uncertainty. We all wish we knew exactly what things would look like tomorrow, let alone in September. But we don't, and we're not going to. And so helping them adjust and have the confidence that you on the school board are relying on the best information, from starting with health and safety issues at the state level, with your local officials, and also working as advocates to make sure the resources are there to deliver effective education in this new mode. I'll turn it back to you, Bob.
Thanks so much, Patrice. So we said we go 45 minutes. We're just about there. I just want to remind board chairs that we will be having our usual check-in and updates tomorrow at 2. We have one of the premier medical people in the field, Richard Melkrite from the Medical Reserve Corps Infectious Disease Section from the Department of Public Health talking to us. Again, we'd encourage you to send us questions either before or during the meeting, but 2 o'clock on Friday is reserved more or less for our board chairs, who hopefully are going back to their boards and telling them what they're hearing. So with that, I want to thank you. I want to thank the commissioner again, and we will be in touch with everybody. And please don't be afraid to send us emails if you have questions. We are able to say we may not have that answer now, but we'll do our best to try to get it. With that, I thank you all, and I thank you, Marie, and we'll see everybody sometime in person again, I hope. Thank you.